Anybody want to go on our walk to talk about wet site plants? Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay.
What did he say?
He said he's going to do a tour and we're going to get to listen.
What did he say?
He said, do you want to come with us?
Okay.
Can you say hello? Say good morning.
Good morning. What's your name?
Miles.
Miles?
This is David, actually.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Yeah, good morning. We'll start. It's 10:03 or 10:04, and maybe other people will join us, but I'm happy to do it for this group. The topic today is, well, let me go back one step. Please ask questions as we go along. I love questions, and I always feel that, the questions you have, the answer to it might be the most useful information you get because it's, the thing you need to know. Always happy to have questions. So the topic today is gardening in wet soils. If you're as old as I am, you might remember the Garden of Eden had evenly moist, perfectly drained soil. And traditionally, gardeners were taught that that's what you strove for. Evenly moist, but well-drained soil. Lots of plants thrive under that condition, but some of us don't have that kind of soil situation. So sometimes we end up with wet sites. And I was forced to become very familiar with wet soils because in a previous job, the director of horticulture insisted on running irrigation on red clay once a day. So often after running, there was standing water. So I had to, replace perfectly good plants that didn't survive wet soil with wet site tolerant plants. So I think when we have a wet site, we should celebrate it and make use of the plants that thrive under those situations. Now, sometimes when we talk about wet soils, people want to know about rain gardens. And a lot of, I have a plant list. Let me grab this. We won't necessarily cover all the plants on this list, but I thought if you had a list of plants you can grow with wet soil, you can go home with it.
What's that? We'll put it right in here.
Okay.
We're going to go look at some of these.
Okay. Rain gardens are places that transition from being bone dry when we're not having rains to temporarily having standing water. And a lot of the plants on this list would survive in a rain garden. I don't know if a rain garden is of interest to you, but there are two, ecologists refer to two types of plants, obligate and facultative. And a wet site plant that is an obligate wet site plant is one that must stay continuously wet, often in standing water. Facultative is one that can, tolerate dry, tolerate saturated, and those are the types of plants that are best for a rain garden. We'll travel now and visit some of the wet sites we have here in the garden. Here we have a really small bog garden, just the lowest part of this bed, not the whole bed. And a bog is characterized by continuously wet soils. And we have, of course, a number of our native pitcher plants. Venus flytraps would also thrive in this location. I don't believe there's any in this spot, this particular garden. But then a beautiful native, the white-bracted sedge, thrives with continuously wet soil. This crinum bloomed many months ago, but some crinums tolerate wet soil. We'll see other crinums in bloom today, so you get a better sense of what they look like. But it's important with any group of plants to not assume that I saw irises growing in a wet site, therefore all irises need wet site. The iris genus is a good example where there are wild irises native to the Middle East that bloom in the spring and then go dormant for the summer, and they have to be bone dry all summer long. And then there are other iris that won't thrive unless they're growing in standing water. On this list, and we'll see some of them in the garden, are irises that thrive in wet soils and will even tolerate standing water above the crown of the plant. Our native hibiscus and the hybrids bred from them thrive in a wet site. They don't have to have a wet site. They'll grow in average moisture. I'd certainly avoid a dry spot. But if you have a wet spot, they just absolutely thrive. You see, this one is almost extending out into the water. This is an example of one of the big hybrid ones. We'll see a lot more of them in the pseudo garden. A lot of grasses are very flexible, tolerating average moisture, but also tolerating periods of heavy rainfall and saturated soils. This is a variegated form of our native river oats. Does fine in sun or shade. It tends to produce lots of seedlings, so in the fall before the seed is dropped, we deadhead it. The Arrow arum, which is Peltandra virginicum, must have a wet site. It's such a tough plant that it doesn't die if it turns dry, but it's going to look absolutely miserable if it's dry. And this is a seed strain with purple stems. They're normally just green. The cultivar is purplicious. And cardinal flower loves moist soil. I don't know if it'll grow in standing water, but it's certainly, you often see it in the wild at the edge of a pond or a stream where the soil stays saturated. It's a plant that tends to be rather short-lived, lasting a year or two, but then producing plenty of seedlings in the garden without ever being weedy. And there are a lot of plants that are common garden plants, but people only grow them in sort of normal soil. That's a stupid thing, normal soil. Like well-drained soil. I think the other Stokesy is still blooming, but most people grow the Stokesaster, with their peonies and bearded irises, but it will tolerate and even thrive in wet soil. Another hibiscus. This is a species hibiscus, one native to eastern Texas, Hibiscus daisicalix. Has a much smaller flower than the hybrids, but some of our local native hibiscus have larger flowers than this. But the herbaceous hibiscus are quite attractive even in their winter forms. The stems turn sort of silvery gray, and the seed pods are really pretty all winter long.
So you said these are native to Texas?
This one is daisicalix. I'll show you some natives that occur in this area. And a number of ferns will tolerate wet soils. This is Woodwardia virginica. Virginica referring to, not so much the state of Virginia, but the original colony of Virginia. It's spreading, right out to the water's edge. This is Hibiscus coccineus. Coccineus meaning scarlet, and obviously that is not scarlet, but this is a white selection of what is a normally red species. And you see it's growing in this mucky soil. I wouldn't want to step out there because I'm sure to sink. And this is another wild species, Hibiscus palustris. Palustris means of swamps. It's a real pretty thing. It's not a huge flower like the modern hybrids, but it's a very pretty thing, and the leaves are nice and fuzzy. If you have a large wet area, this beauty, and feel the leaves, they almost feel like plastic. Feel the leaves
Don't
are,
step in the mud. Just touch.
Not over here. See, isn't that stiff?
Does it feel like plastic?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. This is Echinodoris. There's a close relative that's a common aquarium plant, Amazon sword, and this is a close relative of that. It's a big, beautiful foliage plant, and it's in bloom for all summer long. But it really...
Are all the different size leaves, is this all the one plant?
Yeah, but what it's doing here, the flower stalks, as they finish, start making plantlets on the old flower stalk.
Yes.
Sort of like the house plant, spider plant.
Yes.
Yeah, and so all of these will become, this one already has a little root there.
Oh, yeah.
All of those can be propagated. I love the plant, but you have to understand that it's a pretty steady spreader, so we have to rein it in periodically.
We'll take over.
Yeah. You're welcome to join this tour if you want.
Hey, Dad.
That is a spider.
Wow.
That is a very big spider.
Yeah.
Very sizable.
Nanny, come look at this spider.
This Cyperus, the umbrella sage, is first cousin to papyrus, what the Egyptians used to make paper. And probably can show you that. Yeah. And a lot of people know the plant but don't realize it's winter hardy. It's fully winter hardy in this area. It dies to the ground in the winter, but it's a flowering plant, but it doesn't have, it's sort of like distant grass relative, and grasses aren't necessarily showy, but see, it has this spongy pith in the center of the leaf, and that was used to make paper. The papyrus, yeah, you can have that. And the fun thing about that plant, if you take this whirl of leaves and put it upside down in a container of water, it tends to root and put up new plantlets, a way of propagating it.
Interesting.
Yeah. In its native habitat, well, actually, it's done. Look at that. It's done it. See, this one has produced plants up on the top of the leaf. But, if one of your leaves flops over and ends up in the water, I've never seen them do it up in the air, but they're doing it. You end up spreading. Yeah. Take over the world. There are quite a few irises that prefer a wet site, really thrive in a wet site. Of course, this is not the time of year to look at irises for the most part because they're long since done. And the list you have has a number of irises listed on it. Certainly, Japanese iris can be grown in standing water more often. They're just grown in wet soils. And there's a hybrid between the Japanese iris and the European yellow water iris. And you combine the two names and they're iris sudata hybrids, and they often have yellow new growth, which is rather pretty in the spring when it's fresh. And they're sterile, so they don't produce seedlings like its European parent. But you see, they thrive at the edge of a pond, but would also just do well in average moisture. Yeah, bearded irises would not tolerate wet soil. Yeah, not at all. And I should mention the Louisiana hybrids. These are Louisiana irises that we cut down recently.
See, they got cut down?
Their wild parents are primarily native to like wet woodlands in the deep south. The Mississippi Valley is a center of their native range. And in that habitat, they're largely dormant in the summer when the woodlands are dry and they're shaded. And so they have foliage at that time, but that foliage starts to look really tired, so we cut it to the ground. And then they start putting up new growth. By about now, they're starting to a little way. And this growth will be present all winter long. In their wild habitat, they're taking advantage of the fact that the woodlands are flooded again and the leaves are off the trees, so that they sort of almost summer dormant and more active in the winter months. But the hybrids come in almost every color you can imagine, and they're good-sized flowers. They're also the Louisiana irises are pretty strong spreaders. You can, see a bit of the rhizome out there. Yeah, they'll extend out in the water. Whereas the Japanese iris become big clumps, but they're not spreading around. You can see one of our koi in the pond. Oh, there, did you see the fish? Oh. Okay. Cannas are, most often just grown in a, regular garden bed, but they thrive in a wet site. These are garden hybrids. I don't know which one this is. We have two species of canna that are native to the southeast, Canna glauca and flacida. They're handsome plants. They're not as showy as these hybrids. And these spikes are about done. Well, they have a second spike there, but, the cannas are now come in a wide range of flower color and foliage color. A native plant that I really like is water hemlock. Water hemlock's in the same family as parsley and dill, but many members of that family are deadly poisonous. It's not poisonous to touch, but you do not ever want to eat this plant. But one of our native caterpillars, butterflies, the eastern black swallowtail, the caterpillars only eat members of this family. So if you have, do you see the little caterpillar there? It's a baby.
Yeah, is he born?
Yeah, maybe we'll find a bigger one. But if you have parsley or fennel or dill in your garden and you get caterpillars, they're caterpillars of this eastern black swallowtail because they only eat members of that family. So it's one of those families where there's real common edible plants, but then there's also equal number that are deadly poisonous, but again, only if eaten. But
Things you need to know.
yeah, but the flowers of the water hemlock, like other members of the family, are made use by pollinators.
Yes.
I don't see many on that yet, maybe because it's cool and damp. Yeah. Yeah. Alrighty. Oh. Wet site plant is this little guy, frog fruit, Phyla nodiflora. It's a native. It's a vigorous spreader, but makes a good carpet under bigger plants. It's in bloom all summer long. Pollinators make use of the flowers. Never a showstopper, but it's in bloom, as I said, all summer long, so it earns its keep. We saw the foliage of the crinum over in that little bog garden. This is a more typical crinum. This is Persephone. It's, you know, there are crinums that will grow in standing water, like our native crinum americanum. These big hybrids certainly thrive in wet soil. I don't know if if they would be good in, you know, in standing water. The huge mass of iris is one of our local natives, Iris virginica. We probably have to rein it in. And another example of a hibiscus. And I mentioned our southeast native cannas. This is Canna flacida. It has a bright yellow flower. The seeds are very large, and see the big seeds inside, almost like peas, and they turn black when they're ripe, and they're very hard, and were, you know, hundreds of years ago sometimes used in a shotgun in place of lead shot because they're so hard. One of the common names of the cannas are India shot. What?
Can I feel one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I keep one?
You can keep a whole bunch of them. They might even be ripe enough to plant at home.
Like how many?
You want this whole thing? Is that okay with?
Yeah, how many more are there?
You are just so excited, aren't you?
How many are there in there?
We'll have to count later, huh?
Yeah.
He just thinks this is the coolest.
It's okay.
No, Daddy,
The elephant ears are one of those plants that can be grown in average moisture, but it will really thrive in wet soil. The elephant ears are the same plant that produces taro, important food crop in the tropical world. And there they are often grown in fields that are periodically flooded. The plant down there with white flowers, Hymenocallis, which means beautiful membrane because of the little cup of membrane between the tepals. That's tropical giant, and that loves a wet site as well. Again, you know, one genus, Hymenocallis, there are members that have to have well-drained soils and others that, you know, will do well in wet soil. So do a little bit of research before you plant plants in a wet site, if you're wondering. Across the way is the salvia, Salvia uliginosa. You don't see the weeds growing amongst them. But uliginosa means of bogs, and that one will tolerate a very wet soil. And the big fern up there, well, there's some over that way too, is a native fern, southern maiden fern, confusing common name because not to be confused with the maidenhair fern. But that one will do fine in average moisture, but it'll thrive in a wet site, and with wet site it'll grow out in full sun. It's a spreader, so if you have a big area to cover, it's good. But a really nice aspect of that fern, it's always putting up new growth. Some of the woodland ferns put up all their growth in the spring, and then by now they look a little bit tired, but this is always refreshing itself, so it looks nice.
It's really pretty.
Yeah. And across the way you see a different elephant ear, one of the blackleaf ones. I think that's the old, that might be the old cultivar illustris. Okay. And the rudbeckias, the orange coneflowers, a big genus. Again, you know, example where a number of members of that genus tolerate wet, and you know, others don't. This is Rudbeckia maxima. You can figure out what maxima means. It's big guy, but it's native to the, well, like I think the Gulf Coast states, and there it often grows in, you know, roadside ditches. So it'll very tolerant to wet. Alrighty. Hello. these ditches are not constantly filled with water. If we have an extended dry spell, they'll go dry, but they tend to be wet pretty much most of the year. Couple of beautiful natives, and the wet site garden doesn't need to restrict itself to natives because there's lots of wet site plants from the rest of the world. But this is a little native orchid, Habenaria repens. What is it called? Green spider orchid or something like that. But it's in full bloom right now. The flowers are green. And repens means spreading, and these were planted about a year ago, and it is indeed spreading. And one of the meadow beauties, Rexia, fairly common local native. You'll see it along the roadsides near ditches. And over there, the white striped is a variegated form of Japanese iris. I really enjoy that plant because with the variegation, it's colorful in the garden long after it's in bloom or done blooming. Let's see. You want more of the tour? Or?
We would love to learn. Yes, we are learning so much. We are not very good gardeners, but we have someone who's interested, and so
Lovely.
I decided we would just come and explore.
Okay, great. I've gardened all my life, and you know, my earliest childhood memory is a gardening one. So start them young. Yeah. Oh, here's a good plant. Quite a few grasses. There's some grasses that have to have a wet site. There's other grasses that are really good for rain gardens that transition from bone dried to standing water. And this is the purple muley grass. It's actually the white form of it, and it doesn't bloom until about October, but it's one of the most beautiful grasses in bloom because it becomes a cloud of normally purple flowers, much more colorful than most grasses. And this one is sort of a creamy white thing. But it will grow in wet ditches where it's native, like down on the South Carolina coast. Couple, modern hybrid hibiscus. This one's ended up right in the ditch, so growing with standing water around it. That might be plum passion. I'm not sure, but this is Thalia dealbata. I've always known it by the name of water canna because the foliage looks like canna. But it's not related to canna. It's actually related to a largely tropical family, the prayer plant family, Maranthaceae. And it's showy all summer long. It's in full bloom today, but the flowers are less showy than like the bracts and the seed pods on it. See the little purple flowers there? Yeah. And the bumblebees often like it. But it's spreading underground, so it's if you have a pond and it's a small pond, what I recommend is planting it in a pot to keep it from taking over the whole pond. Sort of like lotus. If you want to grow lotus, lotus will take over a whole pond, but you can grow it in a pot and restrict its growth. Here's a real interesting plant. That's a cranberry. Now you don't see any of the weeds, but see all these cranberry fruit starting? They'll turn red when they're ripe, but this cranberry is with this real narrow creeping foliage.
I've never seen a cranberry plant
Yeah. They'll turn bright red this fall. Lordy, I'm embarrassed to see all the weeds amongst it.
And then the birds will come and eat them.
Well, I don't know. The fruit are so sour, as you know.
Yes.
But, generally the purpose of fruit is for dispersing the seed, so you sort of want to be edible.
Yes.
Because then you get dispersed, otherwise you end up rotting right in place. But I guess somebody ends up eating them.
I've never seen a cranberry plant.
Yeah.
I know I need to use the restroom, so we can
there's a native blueberry, and blueberries and cranberries are in the same genus, Vaccinium. And a former co-worker here said, oh, well, this is the blueberry that looks like a cranberry. And then I said, well, you better look at it. The fruit looks just like cranberries because they were bright red.
Oh.
Last year it only had a few.
Down there now.
Yeah. Oh. I included on the plant list a number of shrubs that are very good for wet sites. This is sweet pepper bush, clethra alnifolia, native shrub. Will grow in, just average soil moisture, but more commonly occurs in damp soils and thrives in a damp soil. Yeah, the insects that are visiting the flowers are not interested in us. They're too busy getting lunch. And there are lots of bumblebees on here, but they're not going to bother you.
Look, there's a butterfly.
Yeah.
Smell it, move on.
Do you smell it's quite fragrant. Oh, that's one of my favorite butterflies, the buckeye butterfly. I love the patterns. Yeah.
Mr. Doug, we're going to have to break off. We've got to go
Okay.
use the facilities.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the tour. I appreciate it.
Oh, we so appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Makes it much more interesting than just walking through to
Well,
listen to somebody who actually
yeah.
knows the plants.
Well, we normally have tours of the garden during open house, so come out other seasons as well.
Sure.
Yeah, and check the website to look at, because there are classes every open house day, but they might not be a tour of the garden, so you can find out when they are, what day and what time. In the summer, we just have classes in the morning because of the heat, but in the summer, there's usually one in the morning and one in the afternoon.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you so
Sure.
much.